clearly a beautiful day for vlogging. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to make the best of this gray weather here because I've got a camera that I want to share with you guys. This is the brand new Sony ZV-1. They sent this to me on Friday. Today is Monday, so I'm going to do a kind of an overview here. I will follow up later with a more complete review, but I'm pretty excited about this. This is a camera that I did not think that I would see Sony ever do. It follows along in the line of the RX100 series. Essentially, it is a point and shoot, but this one has an emphasis on video. I'm going to be using two cameras to film the bulk of this video with because it's hard to film this and film with it at the same time. So right now I'm actually filming on the Sony RX100 V. The camera I've been a big fan of mine, has a very similar lens to what we're seeing on the ZV-1. I've used this camera for a lot of stuff over the years and we'll kind of see how they compare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch out the RX100 V for the ZV-1 right here. Looking smooth. So there's a few differences that you will probably notice on the ZF-1 over something like the RX100 V. The Sony ZV-1 is a new compact camera from Sony that has an emphasis on video features. It's a really nice companion to the RX100 series and is similar in many ways, but this one places the emphasis on video content creation. So as you can see, the body design is very similar to the RX1 cameras, with the biggest differences being 1, a fully articulating screen, and 2, a newly designed microphone. Interestingly, the ZV-1 brings back the multi-interface hot shoe from the RX100 Mark II and gives us the microphone jack from the RX100 7. In many ways, this camera brings together some of the features that people have been asking for a long time. There are some subtle differences between this and the RX100 line, but if you're familiar with Sony camera operation, you'll be perfectly at home on this system. Ergonomics are much improved with a slightly larger grip and a bigger record button for video on top of the camera. The new microphone is a 3-capsule design for better noise reduction, and the camera comes with a shoe-mountable dead cat for eliminating wind noise. It's kind of handy to have that built in. On my RX100, I had to modify it by putting in, these are called Rycote wind jammers, and they're kind of like stickers that you stick on the camera. This one you can put on and take off real easily, and it doesn't look nearly as strange or ghetto. Another thing to mention is there is also a kit version of this camera that's going to come with this, which they call the GP VBT 2BT. That is a wild name. But this is actually pretty cool. So it's a vlogging grip that also doubles as a tripod. And the whole thing is paired via Bluetooth to the camera. So I can do things like start and stop the video, or I can zoom in with the lens. It's really handy to have. And actually, because it's wireless, I don't have to have the camera actually on here. I can just kind of use this to start and stop the camera remote. Pretty cool. So we're going to be using this a little bit today too. So I now have the camera mounted to the GBT, 2BT, whatever it's called. Anyway, this brings me to my next topic, which is image stabilization. Right now I have it turned off. There are 2 modes of image stabilization that you get in both 1080p and 4K. The next one up is standard. Standard certainly helps, but it's typical of what we've seen on Sony's before. You're still going to get the little micro jitters going on. Now, why would you still have standard and have the 3rd active mode? Well, you're going to see in just a second. Active actually puts a slight crop in on the picture, which could or could not be a problem. Let's go ahead and move to active so you can see. That's active. You can see the crop. It's actually very close, and I don't like it quite that close, so I have to extend my arm quite a bit. I will say this though, having active in 4K, this is one of the best image stabilizations that I've seen Sony implement. I think it's actually better than nothing. I will say this, if you're gonna walk around and shoot, it's not GoPro level. You're still gonna get a little jitters going on, but if you're just standing like I am right now, holding the PGB VBT with the camera on the top, it works just fine. But if you're gonna walk, it's going to start becoming problematic, which is why I brought a real gimbal too. I'm gonna go ahead and mount this up to the trusty Evo Rage S. And now we should have proper stabilization. So this will allow me to actually walk around. One of the reasons that I actually like the Sony point and shoot type cameras is that they are small and they are lightweight. So if you do wanna do a walking sequence like this and you want everything to really be smooth, I really wouldn't ever rely on image stabilization, active or not, to do that alone. But with a small gimbal, this is a very lightweight setup that I can use. And what's really cool is when I use the RX100 V for all of this, I would sit here and panic about overheating all the time, especially if it was taking me several takes to get a shot. I don't have to worry about it on the ZV-1. This is actually a very cool little vlogging setup. And we have got the neutral density filter that's built in too, so I can actually vlog kind of wide open. Actually, I'm at f5.6 right now. I can see on my screen because the sun's starting to come out in this really gnarly weather we're having today. I know people are going to ask me though, how is the low light performance? Well, that's the post office, and if it's open, we're gonna give it a shot. So I've got two things that I want to illustrate. Earlier I was talking about Sony having an algorithm now that is going to put an emphasis on the exposure and the color on skin tones and essentially act as a little bit of a spot exposure, recognizing the faces in frame and so putting the emphasis there. So as we go in here, you're going to see the light change drastically. I'm backlit now. I've also got really horrible hair today. Between the pandemic and just general humidity, and it's the Ted Fro, but go in here and there's like no light. But I will say this, that exposure compensation might be kind of key with this camera, because if it's anything of an indication of what I'm seeing on the monitor, it is very bright in here. It's actually way brighter than what I'm seeing it look like in here. So that's something to think about at least, but yeah, low light performance. Another thing that's worth mentioning that I'm really impressed with on here is the speed of autofocus. It snaps into place extremely quickly. Like right now we're at 5.6, so you might get a little depth here, but if I disappear out of frame, you're gonna see how it snaps to the background, and then when I come in, IAF facial recognition all kick in really quickly, which brings me to another point of some built-in functions that we have here just for vloggers. Just for vloggers, I think sounds like a shampoo. So when I first read the specs on the Bokeh button, I was a little skeptical, thinking that this was something that they were going to emulate using computational imaging. I'm going to try and simulate how this works here, but if you're in full auto mode, what it's going to do is, like, let's say right now, okay, so 250th of a second, f5.6, ISO is 125. If I press the C1 button on the top of the screen, let's see what happens here. So now we go into background defocus. So what it does is it actually makes it so it can shoot wide open, essentially. So it's raised the shutter speed to 1/250th of a second, kept the low ISO, but it's actually made it so the back will blur out. So that's kind of an interesting feature, and I can also turn that off, and it's going to go back to something that, yeah, is a lot less, well, they call it background focus clear. So now I probably have stopped down the camera. I can't see what the f-stop is. That's why I'm looking over here. Sorry, guys. Just kind of playing around with this. But it's actually kind of a cool feature. So if you want to ensure and you don't want to mess with exposure or anything, and maybe even putting the ND filter into use, if you want to blur that background out, you can just hit the button and it will set the camera up to do that. Of course, you're going to sacrifice for a really fast shutter speed. Most people won't know that, what that means or what that does anyway, but I digress. Another cool feature on this camera is what they call the product showcase mode, which is the other custom button by default on this camera. So it's C2, which is also the trash can on the back of the camera. So what this is gonna do is, you know, when you've ever done kind of a video and you hold something up to show people and it's not in focus like this, yeah, definitely not in focus, because what it's doing is it's locking into my eye. Well, they have a new algorithm that's built into this camera. So if I enable this mode back here, let's see. So yeah, we've got product showcase on now. So what it's gonna do is it still has IAF, but it's actually going to change the focus up now close, so you don't have to do this nonsense anymore where you're trying to cover your eyes and fake the camera out. It will simply focus in on something that you're trying to show your audience, a product showcase, let's say, and then it will focus back. So it kind of just does the two really quickly. I'm really impressed with the speed of autofocus in this thing. Now, we've been talking about vlogging, a lot of vlogging. Much vlogging today, much more than I usually talk about. This is actually an excellent stills camera as well. So it's kind of wild to see that Sony is releasing essentially a point and shoot in 2020. This camera would have been massive in the heyday of vlogging back in 2014. I still think it's a really useful tool for anybody who creates content. I definitely will be getting one of these because I can see a huge use for this in my life and the stuff that I do. I think it's really pretty awesome. It still doesn't replace the RX line, and I like that they've actually gone for a dedicated video camera because it offers something different. You are missing a few things though if you use the electronic viewfinder in the RX 100s, the little tiny thing that pops up on the side. You're not going to find it in this camera. It's just not there, so it's going to be screen only. However, it is a fully articulating screen, so you can get a variety of angles out of it. The other thing that's missing that I think is a slight bigger deal is the lack of the function ring around the lens. So you can set that up to be exposure compensation, you can set it up to be aperture, whatever you want to on that. You can also use it to focus. autofocus. And that brings me to another point. There really is no manual focus on this camera. The closest thing you can get to manual focus is touch to focus with the touch screen, but I think for some people that would be just fine for video use. I think it is worth noting that this is essentially a pocketable camera. So if you do need more video features, you're probably going to be looking at a video type camera anyway, or at least a full frame mirrorless, something like that. So if you see yourself making a living walking around and talking to yourself, this could be the little setup for you. This is the sad part of the video. I'm going to switch back to the Sony RX100 Mark V. So, probably doesn't look much different, probably sounds a lot different because I think this has a superior microphone in it. But this brings me to my next point, is I'm curious as to know why Sony didn't release a video-centric version of their compact like 6 years ago, back when the G7X from Canon was the hot item. The RX100 Mark III was its closest competitor. I love that camera. It did great video. So did the Mark IV, so did the Mark V, which I'm filming on now. The 6, the 7, probably less so because they changed the lens out to a longer focal length, which you lose a stop, and I just didn't want to use it for video as much. So I think this is a total home run. I'm going to do a full review on this when I've had a little more time to get to know it, because I think it's actually a really good hybrid camera. It's got all the modern Sony features in terms of autofocus and object tracking and object recognition, and so I think it's probably at this price point, if you can do without the electronic viewfinder and the focus ring and a few other things, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. So drop me a comment if there's anything you would like to see in my full review, and until then, I think this is a winner. I'm a big fan. Not a big fan of the street noise, but we're concluding this video, so I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, later.